Venida. How are you
Hello,
today?
I'm doing well, Lucia. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this opportunity.
Welcome to What If I Say Yes? We begin all my interviews with you introducing yourself to my audience. Who are you, Venida?
Well, I am the proud daughter of Reverend Lucy, the late Reverend Lucy G. Rodman, and the daughter of Deacon Robert Rodman. I am the granddaughter of Lucy Perry Whitley and William James Whitley on the maternal side, and I'm the granddaughter on the paternal side of my grandma Pearlie and Grandpa Riedel Corporal. So I am here because of their pouring into me. So I am a daughter, a granddaughter, and I'm also a person who loves essentially bringing joy, empowerment, and belonging to everyone that I meet and encounter. So that's me.
Lovely. Okay, so the next part is tell the audience how we met, whatever you remember.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, I feel like I'm getting a little teary-eyed just like looking at you and thinking about the memories that we had on 7th Street in downtown Jersey City, New Jersey. We were living in neighboring walk-ups. And I remember seeing you and Tu Amor, Carlos, and you two just seemed like just a very interesting couple. You seemed like you were really connected, and Todd and I initially admired the two of you from afar. And then I remember taking the train with Carlos because I believe at the time he was adjuncting at St. Elizabeth's, if I have it right. And we would be on the train and I would see him. And then we struck up conversation. I feel like it was around the 2008 elections. And I feel like we all started talking and we started sharing about our interests. And we started inviting each other to things and we started establishing a relationship. One of the things that Todd and I talk about that we really admired about you two, just the different things that we saw you doing. I remember you all would picnic in Hamilton Park around the corner from our homes. I remember just having this conversation about life and aspirations with the two of you. I remember one time, probably one of the most significant experiences that we had with you two was when Carlos got sick one day. And to be honest, Lucia, I don't even remember if you called 911. I think you came to our apartment for help. So being your 911 really meant a lot to us. And then we all, wound up calling EMS and we all went to the hospital. We met you there. You rode, I believe, in the ambulance, and we were there for a bit. And Carlos was able to, find out what was going on and get himself situated and feeling better. But that was a significant moment. Just sharing. You had gosh, quite a memorable birthday party in Cuernavaca and just having that. So, I know you asked about when we met. I can't really pinpoint the time, but I know that from that meeting, a beautiful relationship developed. So here we are. Thank you for remembering me and asking me. And I'm honored to be a part of this project.
So here's what I remember. I also can't pinpoint the exact time when we met. I remember we were neighbors, yes. At some point, did you or Todd were selling books on the stoops?
Oh, yes. When we were moving, I think.
So I don't know if Carlos stopped by or I saw you anyway. So yes, we started this relationship and You were just a lovely, you weren't married at the time, were you?
We had just gotten married.
You just got
In
married.
05, yeah.
So then
Because that was
I'm
our first
thinking,
home together.
oh, so I was thinking of another big event, but I can't remember what it was. Anyway, so yes, you were this very lovely couple, very
Thank you.
lively. Both your laughters are so contagious and so full of life. And so we always love to be with people like that. So it was just lovely. And yes, that day, so Carlos woke up and something happened with his inner ear that he lost balance, so he couldn't get out of bed. And I freaked out. And yes, I never called 911. I call you. I'm like, I don't know what to do with my husband. He can't stand up and he's throwing up and I don't know what to do. And so you were like, we'll be there. So you came and then you called the ambulance. And they came and we went to the hospital. You were with us. Finally, I don't know, it solved itself. Something just waited a long time in the hospital. And well, he was fine. But also the funny thing that I remember about that time is when the guys from the ambulance came in, they started asking questions. And so one of the questions was what he had eaten that morning. And it turned out that everything that I had given him as breakfast, I hadn't eaten it. So it was like, it looked very suspicious.
Very suspicious.
I had fed him and now he was sick and I hadn't eaten anything. So I was like, oh my goodness, let's see if I don't get in trouble for this.
Oh,
no, I mean, in the end, it didn't have anything to do with the food,
right.
But that was fun. And yes, it was very important for me at that point to have you there and to have your support. And so the fact that you were the couple that came to my mind, it was like, oh, it's so endearing. So and yes, sweet. Later on when I think it was when we introduced Maya to society, because we didn't want to do a Catholic baptism because we're not practicing Catholics. So we created our own ceremony. And I believe that's the one we invited you to in Cuernavaca. And so you flew, you went to Mexico and to Cuernavaca and you stayed with us. And
it was the best trip ever.
I am so happy that you liked it and that you were there for a very special moment. So anyway, throughout the years, we have kept in touch, even though we haven't seen each other that much, but it's a very endearing friendship that we have with both of you.
We feel the same.
And because I know a few things about your life, I said, actually, this is also an invitation to Todd. He's going to have to be my next guest.
Absolutely. I'll let him know. He'd be more than happy.
But I thought you would be the perfect people to be interviewed and to be part of this homage to my brother. I don't remember. Were you there when Carlos turned 40?
We met him. Yeah, we were.
And we had a party.
Yes, because we wrote things down and it was at your house, right?
Yes. So then you must have met my brother Hector. I don't know if you remember him, but he was Hector there.
In Cuernavaca too.
Yes.
Because we all hung out in Cuernavaca. That's where I really remember him from.
Okay.
And then we went to his memorial service.
Yes. True. Okay. So for all those reasons and many more, you are here. And I'm so honored that you're here, that you said yes. So let's jump into the meat of this YouTube channel. Tell me about a moment in your life when you asked the question, what if I say yes? You then said yes, and you did something.
Yeah. You know, I was reflecting upon it, and it would have to be when I was probably 11 years old. Yes. And it, mm, let's see, the person who was primarily involved with this encounter was Rose Daniels. And she was at my church. She was one of our youth leaders. In fact, she was our Sunshine Band director. And she would teach the children all of the songs for whenever we had to sing in church. And then she was also responsible for giving us our little recitations. So there were either Christmas, we called them Christmas pieces or Christmas recitations. Essentially, they were poems reflecting on whatever holiday there was. So she was always responsible for that. And then my mother and grandmother were responsible for helping us, my sisters and I, memorize the poems, right? Memorize the recitations. However, it was interesting because even though I had everything memorized, we had practice at home, my mother and grandmother were very big on public speaking and training us. Even though I had everything down pat, whenever it would come to any holiday, whenever I would stand up with the microphone, I would start my recitation and then I would start crying. So now this was pretty much my whole life. And let's fast forward to when I was 11 years old. It was June of 1977. She must have given me the piece in May in preparation for Children's Day. Children's Day, I believe, not only nationally, but probably globally, is celebrated in many churches on the second Sunday of June. Nevertheless, she gave me this really long poem. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was the longest poem that I had ever received. It was entitled The Creation by James Weldon Johnson. It's a very, very famous piece. And I was just like, I can't believe Rose is giving me this piece because it's so long. And I wasn't sure. And I feel like if I told my mother, like, I really didn't want to do it, she would encourage me anyway to do it. And I had some questions about it because it was so long. Was I able to memorize it? You know, would I cry? So I said yes. And I memorized the piece. And my mother would make jokes about it because she would hear me talking in the room. And she would say, oh, is Venida talking to herself? Then she would realize, oh, she's going over her poem. She's going over her recitation. So here we are. Children's Day, June of 1977, I had the piece memorized and I stood before the audience and I started, it starts off and God stepped out on space and he looked around, you know, so I started it and I looked at the audience and fear just overtook me again. And I started crying. And then I think Rose came to get me. And I don't know if my mother came at that time, but anyway, they escorted me to, this was, New Covenant Temple, Harlem, New York. This is where our family church was located, where we worshiped for the first 3 decades of my life. And they took me sort of like off to the side in a room. And I was like trying to get myself together. My mother was in there. Deacon King was in there. And I think Rose was in there as well. And then I think they were continuing with the program with the other kids. So they had me in the back. And I was just like, they were like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And my mom said, she looked at me and she said, Venida, do you want to do it? Sorry, just thinking about my mom. She said, Venida, do you want to do it? And I said, yes. And then she said, you can do it. You can do it. So anyway, I went back out there. I said the whole thing without crying. And I got my first standing ovation at the age of 11 years old. And I never cried again after that point. And that was a pivotal moment in my life, which led me to, I would essentially say, a life of public speaking.
Oh my goodness. I'm just picturing like what you were feeling in that moment.
Yes. Yeah. You know, because they say that public speaking is the number one fear. Right. And, you know,
isn't that like bigger than death?
I think so. It's up there. I think it's definitely up there with, I think it's like the fear of dying and the fear of public speaking. At one
Mhm.
time, it was the number one, but they're all up there, right? I'm sure fear of heights is probably up there too. But anyway, there's just something that can like overtake you that's inexplicable.
Mhm.
And even though like I knew what I was supposed to say, like all those many years I knew what I was supposed to say, it was that level of, I guess, lack of confidence, insecurity, seeing all those people just staring at you, like you being the focus.
Mhm.
And I guess it's something that I couldn't handle or my body couldn't handle or people in general have a hard time handling, right? So there's probably a whole nother conversation about what it means to have the attention on you,
Mhm.
right? You know, and like what it means when all eyes on you are on you, even when you are well capable of doing whatever task it is. So
Mhm.
that just came to me. But anyway.
So did Rose have uh, a secret plan by giving you this very long poem?
I think she did.
Yeah. You
I
never
think she
talked
did.
about that with her?
We did talk about it. I'm going back because I do honor Rose like in a number of different settings when they
Mhm.
talk about like people who made a difference in your life.
Mhm.
And I believe I had this conversation with her, and she was excited to give it to me because she knew I could do it.
Mhm.
And
Now, how long was it? Just to give us an idea.
it
In
was,
Spanish, they're called estrofas, but I don't know in English. But like these blocks of
yeah, like stanzas or
stanzas. How
something.
many stanzas, or how long?
Yeah, I'm gonna Google it. It's probably like at least probably close to maybe 5 minutes. It's probably close to like I don't remember how long. Like it's long.
Very
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
Very long.
It's really long. You know, you can look it up. It's a very famous poem.
Do you
So
still remember it?
some of it, yeah, some of it, yeah. Do you want me to try to say some of it?
Sure. Now that you overcame your fear, go ahead.
I know. I don't know how much I remember, but it goes a little bit like it's funny because when I do mic checks on Sunday, sometimes I like say share some of it. And God stepped out on space and he looked around and said, I'm lonely. I'll make me a world. As far as the eye of God could see, darkness covered everything, blacker than 100 midnights down in a cypress swamp. Then God smiled and the light broke and the darkness rolled up on one side and the light stood shining on the other. And God said, that's good. And it goes on with the creation story. Yeah.
Oh. Now, do you remember what it meant to you, just the message of that poem at 11 years old?
Yeah. I felt like it was beautiful. I felt like I was sharing something very special. I believed even at that age that God did create everything in the world. And for me to have that opportunity, it was meaningful. Like I felt like it was significant. And I felt I knew it was a big deal for me to be saying that poem because I had the longest one. And usually the older kids got the long ones. And I had a long one, and I knew it was like because, like, again, to your point about Rose's plan, I was like, she's just something else. Like, she wants me to push myself. She wants me to really like lean into challenging myself, and she was trying to, I believe, help build my confidence in myself. So,
It's
yeah,
funny when you mentioned later when you went back and your mom tells you, asks you, Venida, do you want to? It reminds me of something that Hector would say, like when he would ask you something, it would be, ¿quieres hacer algo? Do you want to do something? And then he would say, del verbo querer, from the, so do you want to do something from the verb to want? Like emphasizing what the verb want means.
yes, wow,
Like,
that makes a
Venida, do
difference.
you want to do it?
Yes, yeah. Do you? But that's it, right? Because there are a number of things that we we experience in life. There can be challenging situations. Um, you know, there can be goals. You know, I just mentioned to you we did a half marathon. You know, and it's like I had to ask myself because initially I wasn't. I told myself I'm not going to run any more half marathons. Then my friend was going to do it, and then I was just like open to it.
Mhm.
And at the beginning of the training, I felt like I didn't want to do it. I was just like kind of training, but like my head wasn't into it. My heart wasn't into it. And then I sort of had to get myself together, and I had to really, I guess, essentially ask myself, do I want to do it? And then I said, yes, here we go. And then we wound up running our third half marathon. And I remember recently one of my students said, oh, Venida, you're going to do a marathon now, right? Because like that's the natural cycle. If you do a half, then you go to a full. And I said, no, I have no desire. I don't want to do a marathon. Like there are some other challenges that I would like to undertake. Like a marathon's not one of them. And I'm very unapologetic about it. I have no shame in that. Like I want to run 26.2 miles, right?
Mhm.
So I think that word
Mhm.
want really is significant, right?
Mhm.
I want to challenge myself with another triathlon.
Mhm.
I want to write a book. I want to do a number of things that I know will be challenging. However, when you want to do something, I
Mhm.
feel like you'll wind up doing it.
Mhm. It sounds like it brings you back to the essence of why would you want to do, what would you even consider doing something? If it's in the one space, then go ahead. If it's in the, well, because everybody does it, because like,
Right,
that
right.
is different.
Exactly, exactly. And for my mother to ask that question, I liken that whole scenario to like a boxing match, right? When they take the boxer into the ring, like during one of the rounds when, he's like getting his rest or she's like getting massaged or whatever. And then it's like, come on, champ, you can do it, go back in there and, like do what you have to do. And I felt like that, like, part of my village who was in that space, like Brother King, Mom, Rose, like they were in there like, you got this, you can do it. Come on, champ, get out there in the ring. And like, so I wanted to do it because I had memorized the poem. I had memorized the piece and I wanted to be able to, share it. So.
Do you remember how you felt once you finished the poem?
Yes, it was an overwhelming feeling. Like I was shocked, because people were just like clapping and like standing up. And I was just looking at them like, oh, well, thank you. Like, yeah, I was overcome with joy. Like I felt so proud of myself that I had accomplished that. And then I got through it without crying. Like it was such a tremendous sense of accomplishment, having been able to get through it and for having people receive me in that way, right? And it was beyond just the applause and the ovation. It was the fact that they knew Venida. Like they were like church members. They'd seen me grow up, those the past 10, 11 years, they knew my struggles, so for their applause meant a lot because they were cheering me on because they knew what I had struggled with regard to the public speaking, right? So it's one thing to get applause. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking about this. I'm preparing for a sermon. So I'm like, it's one thing to get applause from like strangers. It's another thing to get applause from people that you know, right? Even when we were running the half marathon, one of my friends was up here. She came up to cheer us on. And she was at different points. And like there were different people along the route cheering me on. I felt good. I was like, thank you, thumbs up. But there was something special about Angela cheering us on. Right? Like someone that someone that like knows the fact that you trained, knows what it took for you to get here, knows about some personal struggles, and then they're cheering you on. Like that makes a difference. So yeah, I was so happy. I was so happy.
Now, do you remember? So you mentioned that set up for a life of public speaking. So first question, did you ever cry again or never?
No,
Never.
never cried again.
Do you remember the next time you had to do public speaking? What
Yeah.
was it and how did you feel?
Yeah, great question. So then that was when I was 11. So then I shared speeches after that. I don't remember the exact next one, but because of like the culture, it would have been probably Christmas of that year. Like the next speech would have been during like a significant religious holiday. So So I was probably, let's see, in the 6th grade, maybe when I did that. So my next significant public speaking experience was in 8th grade when I was selected to do the speech for graduation. I
Mm.
was selected along with Marco Materassi, he was quite the looker, and I had a crush on him. But anyway, so we were asked to say the speech. They would always ask 2 students, and I was selected. Marco was
Two
selected.
students preparing whole speech, or two
Yep,
students talking
it was
independently?
one whole speech, and we got together and we planned the speech. And there was one part he said, and then there was, I wish I had it. Then there was another part that I said. But I will tell you something interesting, Lucia. At my Catholic school, so I went to Catholic school from K to 8. My hometown of Teaneck, New Jersey. Like I would say speeches, like I would be the reader for like mass and a number of different events, and I wouldn't cry. I only cried in New York, which is very strange. At our, we also went to a Pentecostal church in Harlem. So we would leave New Jersey and go to New York. So I would only cry there. So they knew like that I was a speaker at the Catholic school. So it wasn't that it was so strange that I was selected for the 8th grade speech. I can even remember in 7th grade, George Nicholas called me. Billy Joel's song was out, Big Shot. And I remember being invited to the front of the line because all the readers were going to the front because we were going to walk across the street for mass or some program. And I remember George saying, "Oh, you big shot," or whatever. So that was 7th grade. But I'm almost positive I never cried. It's weird. So
Yeah. I'm very curious now that you mentioned you only cried in New York. Why is that?
I don't know. Maybe it was the pressure of, I don't know, family, or like I don't know, because it was a very supportive environment as well. Like that was my village. It was my family church. It was my home church. So I don't know. It was just like all the pressure of like the expectations of people expecting you to do well, like family members and things of that nature. And maybe at the school, maybe it wasn't like, it was important, but maybe it wasn't that significant. Like I don't know. And I'm still, even in my 50s, still trying to unpack that. But I was invited and I said the graduation speech, Marco and I was so proud. I was so proud. And then I went on to say the high school speech. I was one of the speakers for my high school graduation.
Now tell me, there must be a difference between being in front of everybody and speaking someone else's words and being in front of everybody and saying your own words. What is the difference for you? And when was the first time after that speech with the other student? When was the first time when you wrote and delivered a speech all by yourself?
This was after graduation, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. After the 8th grade graduation, it was 9th grade.
Oh.
My mom entered us. My sisters and I were in oratorical contests. So my church would have these youth events, and as part of a particular event, it was called the fall rally, spring rally, we would have contests. So we had regional churches, and then the big contests, everyone from the various regions would come together. So, my mom wanted us to participate, and this was for high school students. So my older sister participated, she won. And then when I was in 9th grade, I signed up. Everyone was older than me. So I had to do the runoffs in the Eastern New York district. And then we went to the main event and we competed with people from like the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, all the way up to Buffalo, New York. So there were like 7 districts, I think. Yeah. And then, so I represented Eastern New York. And then that was my first speech that I wrote for a contest. And my mother worked with me. I remember she'd be working, she would come home. It would be late, and we had like a little music stand, and she would stand me up in the dining room, and I remember standing there and she would say, nope, do it again. Nope, do it again.
Mhm.
And all of the students had the same introduction. So we would have to say, to the presiding officer, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, right? So everyone had to do that intro. So when my mother was like working with me and everything, at one point she said, this is what I want you to do. She said, when you get to the ladies and gentlemen, she said, I want you to say it as if you are at the circus. Or she said, I want you to say it, ladies and gentlemen. So during the contest, the big contest, I got up there and I started my speech and I said, to the presiding officer, honorable judges, and then I said, ladies and gentlemen. And the crowd just like, woo, they reacted like, well, okay. And I went for it. Ninth grade, went for it. And then I won. I wound up winning.
What was the theme? What did you write about?
Oh, gosh. It was something related to youth, probably, and my involvement in church and my relationship with God or something. I can't remember. Probably like my community involvements or just some of the things that I probably was engaged in. I wish I could remember that speech. If I dig for it, I might be able to find it, but yeah.
How did you feel after delivering your own words for the first time in public?
It was such a good feeling. It was an incredible feeling. Like everyone was coming, congratulating. My mom was so happy. My parents, my siblings, my friends, like it was a big deal. And I really felt proud of myself because there were people who were older than me. There was definitely someone, I remember Mark, he competed with me. He was in the 12th grade. Like they were kids that were older. So like I felt such a sense of accomplishment being a ninth grader. And like I just felt like I could speak well, and like my mom's work and my grandmother's work and like a lot of what they did, really made the difference in my life. My siblings, like we always get that. And it's funny, like being a person of color is like, you get that, oh, you're so well spoken, or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, like I'm being myself. However, I honestly feel like my mom and my grandmother knew that if I was well spoken, I'd be able to have opportunities and doors open to me that may have been closed because of the fact that we're Black, right? And racism is real, racism exists. And I feel like my mother was always pushing us to have a voice, to know how to speak, and then to have a voice and to speak up for yourself and to speak up for things that are important to you. So that voice, that speaking has been like really a part of like our lives.
I would like to follow that thread or that no, it's not a process, that it's not a trip. What is the word? That journey.
Yeah, the journey. Yeah.
I want to follow that journey from when you were 11 years old to now. But before, I want to make a parenthesis. I want you to talk about your mom and your grandma. What made them have that training or that self-aware or that knowledge that was super important for you? How did they learn it themselves? How did they explore it? How did that happen?
Yeah. So my great grandmother, Lucy Wilson, was a musician for a church. She was also a school teacher. And she passed away when my grandmother was very, very young. And I think my grandmother was only about 7 years old when she passed. But there was something that she had to have instilled in her children who were older than my grandmother that gave them a love for maybe public speaking. I really don't know about what they had, but that went down to my grandmother because my grandmother would do speeches. My grandmother loved the arts. She began to play the piano. She played the guitar, and she would do recitations in church, even into her senior year. You know, we would sit there in church, and my grandmother would do her famous poem, and my mother loved the poem too, The House by the Side of the Road. And my grandmother would speak like this because she was such an orator, you know, like very dramatic. And she loved acting and everything, right? That was my grandmother. And then with my mother, so then my grandmother exposed my mother to the arts. So when my mother was a little girl, she sang, and then she also would do speeches in churches. In fact, my mother either sang or spoke at a school that was not integrated. So she would not have been able to go to the school because of segregation, but they had her come in to perform. Go figure. So she was there to perform. In fact, my mother was on the radio one day, and then her little brother, who's 2 years younger, heard her, and he was like crying. He's like, you know, little Lucy. They call my mother Little Lucy, my grandmother Big Lucy. Little Lucy, you know, how can I get in the box? Because she was in the radio. Her brother was trying to figure it out. So my grandmother exposed my mother to the arts. They were involved in church. So within church, you know, my mother would sing and she would speak. She would sing, she would speak. And she delivered her first sermon at a young age. And
how old? Younger than 11?
I think she was in her teens, I believe. She was in her teens. And then my grandmother was an evangelist. She was a minister. My mother was a minister. You know, I'm a minister. So that whole like public speaking, you know, sharing publicly, you know, it's all been generationally, you know, a part of my family from my great grandmother, like being in front of people, speaking as a teacher even. So
it was in your blood, it was in your genes, it was in your bones.
So true, so true. Yeah, my siblings are public speakers as well. So
okay, so now tell us the journey from 11 to where you are now. What are the and there's another word, head posts?
Oh, okay.
Is that the word? Or what are the
yeah, I think like light posts, head posts, or
like those defining moments
Absolutely.
that took you where you are right now.
Sure. Yep. So we talked about the creation at 11. We talked about 8th grade graduation. We talked about 12th grade graduation. We talked about the oratorical contest when I was in 9th grade. And then when I was in my 20s, I just felt like, you know, I'm a spiritual person, and, you know, I believe in like moving of the Spirit. And I honestly felt like the Holy Spirit was moving me to preach, to share the good news and to share the gospel. And I was very apprehensive. I was like, I'm not going to do this. You know, I was very insecure about it, lacked a lot of confidence. I'm like, I'm not a Bible scholar. I don't know, like all these things that these people are preaching on and whatnot. And I had a number of friends that sort of, in my world, confirmed what I already believed to be true, where they were feeling like, I feel like you're going to go in this direction, you know? And I didn't want to accept it, and it took a while. And finally, I said yes. And I opened myself up to essentially what God had for me. And in that, in the saying yes and really being open to the direction I was taking, a number of things opened up for me. You know, I decided to go to seminary. I decided to be open to being a youth minister as initially part of an internship. And then that opened up a number of doors for me. I was ordained. But it's funny because I didn't want to be a pastor, right? And I didn't think that I was going to do like ministry full time, because I was also working in higher education. And I just felt like I wanted to do that, and I didn't really want to give that up, and I didn't see like everything sort of like coming together. At one time though, I did want to go into ministry full time right after I got ordained, but then since that didn't work out in the way that I thought it was going to work out, I felt like, you know, I'll just continue, higher ed and move forward with that. And then I'll like preach on the side, if you will, like preach if people invite me to preach, or preach a few times a year. And so be part of like ministerial teams, but not be a pastor. And fast forward to the pandemic in 2020. And I had talked to a couple of pastors about my secret desire. I got to a certain point where I was like, I feel like I am supposed to be a pastor. And then I did speak to some pastors, and they gave me some words of wisdom, advice, but I still didn't really want to let it be known. It was sort of like a secret dream. And when the pandemic hit, I remember leaving my office, and I remember closing the door. And at that time, we all thought, oh, this is just going to last for a couple of weeks. And I remember the schools, the university said, everyone will be back in 2 weeks, So, but I remember closing my door, and I just felt like when I closed the door at the time, something touched me, something moved me. And I felt like I am closing this door, but something else is going to open for me. Like, I just felt like something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. So many people were doing different things during that time, over those couple of weeks. Like, it was like, oh, like horrible things are happening on the outside. However, on the inside, I feel like there could be some opportunity for growth. There could be some opportunity to do some things that have been lying dormant. And one of those things was like, maybe it's time to move forward in some way, in some pastoral capacity. Folks were getting on Zoom. I'm like, okay, really, there's no excuse for me. Like, I could do something on Zoom. So I started a church called Embrace Church. Embrace is an acronym, and it stands for encouraging members to boldly receive all of Christ's embrace. And I wanted it to be a church that was affirming of the LGBTQIA plus community, a church that was progressive, a church that talked about anti-racist issues, a church that was focused on women in leadership, a church that was promoting all of the things that so many other churches had said no to. I wanted to open myself up and open up a space for people to feel like they belonged in a faith-based space. For people who had been harmed in church spaces, like, I wanted there to be a place where people could just come together and be their authentic, true selves, and know that God loves them no matter what, no matter how they identify, no matter who they are. So that church community, while we haven't met in a couple of months, just because another opportunity opened up because of that opportunity, where I co-pastor a church in Brooklyn, New York. But Embrace took us all through the pandemic together, where every Sunday at 1:00, we would gather on Zoom. And it was nice that you and your family came to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary that year. That November 27th. So that was quite significant. It was such a beautiful experience those couple of years. So because I said yes to the Embrace experience, I'm like, okay, Lord, I'll do it. Then a door opened up for me. I get an email, I will say out of nowhere, where someone's like, hey, how you doing? We see the work that you're doing. Do you want to apply to be a pastor of our church? We are a progressive church in Brooklyn, New York. I'm like, this is a joke. Seriously. Like, this is So I wound up saying yes. And
why didn't you believe it was
because it was just weird. Because it was just like, really, you want me to be your pastor? Like, you don't really, who are you? You don't know me. It was like it was signed by the search committee, like not even an individual person. It just seemed suspect. Like, I was a little suspicious. So, but then I'm like, whoa, this is real. This is real, And then I looked up the church, and I'm like, whoa, this is a serious like church, And then I had to be grateful, and I had to honor my gifts, and I chose not to minimize the fact that I am gifted as a pastor and as a leader and as a speaker, and I am serious about affirming communities that have been blocked and rejected from the church, right? And I know that God has given me something special to do. So why wouldn't someone be interested in that? So, so anyway, here we are. It's a church with a shared leadership model. They restructured things from when I first applied, and they asked would I be interested in a shared leadership model, an executive council where there would be 3 pastors, leading the church. And I said, sure. So I'm one of 3 pastors leading the church. I'm the co-pastor. There are 2 of us who are co-pastors of teaching and community. And then there's 1 pastor who is the pastor of operations. And the 3 of us are responsible for leading Forefront Church in Brooklyn, New York, which is a progressive faith community. We've been in existence for 10.5 years, and we are bringing life and love and hope and healing to a number of people. So so I'm still speaking. I'm preparing sermons as we speak. I have a sermon on Sunday after I come back from vacation. so yeah, it's exciting. It is it's challenging. However, it's rewarding.
2 things. I remember when you were living in Jersey City, that one time in your apartment, we talked about the work you were doing with couples before getting married. And it was amazing. So what I remember is that you would meet with the couples and have them have the difficult conversations before getting married, that are the difficult conversations that if you don't have, get you in trouble and maybe get you divorced after you get married.
Absolutely.
That was a beautiful job and beautiful work. And it was so uncommon because it's so rare that couples actually sit down and talk about money or talk about their families or like. So I remember that one.
I'm still doing it. Thank you.
You're still doing it?
I'm still doing the work. And do you know that a couple that I'm working with now, whose wedding I'm officiating in August, after one of our sessions, so much resonated with them that, because we've been meeting like once a month, they called me the next week and said, can you do an emergency, because they knew, I was going away and everything. Can you do like an emergency meeting with us before, this week? They said, like, can you fit us in this week? And I said, yes. And there was so much that came up for them that they wanted to still process. So it's very rewarding work. And these are, to your point, the conversations that we have now so that they don't wind up divorced, so.
And you know what you're getting into. I mean, there are so many things that a deep conversation can solve before jumping into the adventure.
That's
okay.
Right.
And the second thing, before we go to the moment in your life when you decided to say no, is how beautiful it is to see how you went from this little girl who used to cry at public speaking to now one of the jobs that have one of the hardest jobs that have to do with public speaking is coming up with sermons. Is it called sermons? Yes. Sermons very often.
Every other week. Yeah, pretty much every other week.
And being in front of people, and you may not know, and just delivering it. And so it's not only the fact that you're doing public speaking, is that you're also sharing whatever you are and whatever you feel is important. So it's that whole arc is so beautiful.
Thank you.
So good for you, Venida.
Thank you.
And thank you to Rose and your mom and your grandma and your great grandma. Okay. So now it's time to move to the moment in your life when you decided that saying no was a much better option. What was it?
This is an interesting no. There are a couple of other no's that I feel like I'm thinking about because they relate to boundary setting. And I feel like self-care is extremely important. So I have had to say no to gatherings and, maybe social functions or going to see a play or something, because it was just like I needed my sleep, right? Or I needed my rest. This no, and I still feel like there's a no in here somewhere, where we set a boundary around caregiving. So I hold a number of different hats. And one of the hats that my husband and I have been wearing for the last 5 years has been the hat of caregiver, right? My parents and my husband and I, we've all been living together since 2018. As my parents had gotten older, we felt the need to all be together so that we could give them the support that they needed. And it has been a tremendous blessing, hard work, however rewarding, and we wouldn't have it any other way. I really thank God. I'm so grateful for my husband, who has been a partner in it, right? He's been deep into it, not from the periphery, not from the sidelines, but really in it, like helping me with my parents as if they were his own parents. And my mother passed away actually on our wedding anniversary, November 27th, 2022, about 5 or 6 months ago. And we've been living just with my dad, and we have seen that he needs more engagement and he needs more connection. So we have been working really up until the time we were scheduled to go away to try to get him placed. And one of my sisters was sort of spearheading this to get him placed in assisted living. So initially it is for respite, so that my husband and I, as caregivers, there are facilities that allow your loved one to stay there for respite while to stay there so that we could get a respite. So initially he is there for that. However, he will be staying. We're working on things so that he can stay there permanently, right? We have had this conversation with him, and he likes the place, which is good, but a part of me does get a little emotional because I'm like, wow, we did have the both of them together, but things look a lot different when it's just the one parent and you're living with two people who are, working quite a bit, who might not be there all the time for him. So he goes to the senior center in the mornings. However, he spends quite a bit of time alone, right? So I'm, a pastor. Todd is, a doctoral student, and he's also a professor, right? So there's a lot going on, and I'm still on campus directing Women's Center for Equity and Diversity. So there's a lot that we do. And, we pour into other lives as well as it relates to our, while we are child-free, we pour into the lives of our godchildren and our nieces and nephews. So there's a lot that we do. And I want my father to be able to be connected to people outside of his senior center, outside of the dinner that we share together, where he's doing more activities and, he's engaging with more people on a consistent basis. So essentially, we've said no to caregiving at this time of our lives, right? Where, that immediate parental caregiving, there's still some care that we give, but I'm talking about up close and personal caregiving. So I have to say that, it has been emotional. I think outsiders could look in and people have said, oh, well, you and Todd need your time and, it's good and you'll have more time together, which is true. However, I feel like, I'm concerned about him, his safety. Will he adjust properly? He's been in there for like 3 days now, and he did get a little confused because he's like, well, when are you and Todd coming back? Because when you come back, then I'm coming home, right? And like, I don't want to get misty here, but anyway, I'm like, well, Dad, we'll talk about it when I come back, because even though he knew that he'd be staying there permanently, he still gets confused about the full plan, right? So that saying no, I know ultimately, Todd and I will have more time for rest, more time for some other things. And also though, that saying no will help my father as he's aging. I honestly feel to feel more connected. I honestly believe to feel more connected. So that's my no story.
And it just occurred to me, going back to these conversations that you have with couples before they get married, Did you and your siblings ever have a conversation with your parents about how they wanted to live their golden years and what happened if they were sick or incapacitated? Did you have that conversation?
Excellent question. So I had the conversation sorry, let me back up. My mother had a conversation with her daughters just in terms of like her estate and whatnot. And, she shared that I was going to be the executor. Like she shared that with my siblings, right? Mm-hmm. And then Todd and I had a conversation like with my parents about, well, I don't want, my mother kept saying, and my father, we don't want you all to take care of us. We want you to live your lives. Mm-hmm. Just, you can put us up in a facility. You can put us in a nursing home. And I'm like, I'm not putting you in a nursing home. Like, we'll take care of you, Mm-hmm. But there was that back and forth. However, all of us, like all the kids and my parents, we never had that. And it would have been beneficial. We were focused on like ensuring that like the property that we were looking at like had an elevator for them and like had enough space and things of that nature. So everything worked out, and we all moved in together in 2018, and it was right before the pandemic, so that we were able to have that time with them. Thank God, to keep them safe. They never got sick. None of us ever got sick. And to really like learn more about each other and to really love on each other and to really take care of each other. And while Todd and I were taking care of them, there's so much that they did for us, right? Because, they're my parents, and, they adored us, and that emotional support was wonderful and touched us and blessed us as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that could be also one of the services you could start offering. No, it's
absolutely, yeah.
Combining these two, before they get married, and then having these difficult conversations with their families when they get older.
Excellent suggestion.
I just gave you another
Thank you.
work. As if you were not busy enough, Venida.
Nothing else to do.
Yes.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We're as I said I said yes to sharing oh gosh, with Todd, we're going to start an endowed fund for students. Yeah, for Black and Hispanic students at Syracuse University who are coming down to New York to do an internship. So I just keep saying yes. And I love your project that you're working on because, when you say yes, it opens up so many doors for people to be uplifted and empowered and touched, and, for you to help in some ways change the trajectory of people's lives and generations. So Lucy, I'm going to keep saying yes. And thank you for inspiring me and motivating me in so many ways.
I'm going to take the want that your mom mentioned and close this to say, now we have learned that it's not only enough to say yes to what if I say yes to something. It's a yes that has to be landed, or it has to be rooted in, do you want to do this? Venida, awesome. Do you want to do this? And then you get to do it. Thank you so much for having come to What If I Say Yes? I love this conversation. I miss you.
I miss you too, Lucia. When we come up to Syracuse, we're gonna pop in. We've been talking about it, so we'll make it happen the next time we come up to Syracuse. It's been a while, but we'll get up there.
Okay, promise.
Yes.
Send me pictures, images, whatever you would like to share with the audience about your yes and your no.
Okay.
And say hello to Todd.
I will.
Have a nice lunch.
Thank you.